Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
Indy. Come here.
I'm Ross Barnett. I'm also here.
Sorry, there is a cat fight right outside my office.
We can wait for it if you want to, so that it doesn't have cats overtop you the entire time.
I'll
in
just
this
go
episode.
scare the bully cat away. Just a second.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, it's chaotic here. I'm Dr. Kimberly Plomp. I am a bioarchaeologist. I study the human skeleton, health and disease, and evolution.
And I'm Dr. Ross Barnett, and I'm here.
And today we're reviewing Pokemon, 2 episodes of the anime series Pokemon, which have something to do with paleontology or archaeology. What is your relationship with Pokemon? Have you ever seen it or played it or otherwise been in any way involved in it?
I didn't even know
Nope.
it was a show. I thought it was just a card game when I was younger that became an app. I really liked it. I get it now. I get the hype. It's so cute.
Oh, I'm even more confused.
Well,
Yeah,
I think it's all really cute.
No, I did not enjoy this.
Oh, really?
At all.
I really did.
No. No! Just
It's
no.
so cute. And-
No.
Yeah, I'm a fan now.
If I'd seen Jigglypuff, I would have drop-kicked it in the next week.
It's so cute.
I mean, I'm even more confused now than
And Squirtle.
like before. I mean, just what the hell? I mean, I'm old enough that I grew up on, He-Man, Transformers, Thundercats, proper TV shows that had no cash-in value whatsoever.
Mm.
It just incidentally also had toy lines with them, but they were like, literary masterpieces compared to the utter crap that these 2 episodes were. So yeah, I'm not impressed, and I will delve into that deeper later on.
So here's my understanding of Pokemon, because I've never seen an episode of the show before now. I've never played a game, but I did have one student in one of my classes one time that was really into it, and he wanted me to understand Pokemon. So during the final exam, he gave me the graphic novelization of like the first 6 episodes. So I've like read the comic book of the first few episodes.
Oh, wow.
And my assessment of it is it's basically the story of a spoiled 10-year-old who accidentally keeps failing upwards in this society that seems to be centered around this version of dogfighting for some reason. Like everybody in society just is like totally interested in just fighting these animals together.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. So we chose 2 episodes to review here. One of them was suggested by a viewer, Thomas, so thanks for that one. And the other one is one that, again, my students have brought to my attention. So I guess we'll go through them one at a time and then sort of have a general discussion about them after we talk about each one specifically. So who wants to review, what's the episode called? Attack of the Prehistoric Pokémon?
I'll do that one. Okay. You want to do it, Ross, instead? You looked really excited. No. You can do it.
I'll do the other one.
Okay, so there is Ash and 2 other people and Pikachu and oh fuck, now I've forgotten everything. So they they're at this dig, right? This paleontological dig where they're hoping to find prehistoric Pokemon. And so they want to find the fossils of the prehistoric Pokemon. And I thought it was cute. So Ash finds something and he's really excited. And he runs up to the main paleontologist and they're like, look what I found. I found a Pokemon fossil. And he was like, I think he said it's the fossilized manure of a Pokemon. So it's a coprolite, which is really cool. They were all grossed out, but coprolites are amazing.
That was Gary, not Ash.
Oh, was it Gary? Right.
Gary,
he had an entire team of cheerleaders calling his name out.
Who is he? He just...
That's what my notes say as well. Who the fuck is Gary and why does he have cheerleaders?
Same. Yeah. Why does he have cheerleaders?
That I don't know. I ignored that part. I was just really enjoying the Copperlight part. And then, so then there's bad guys that apparently like, it's kind of like the Care Bears or whatever, where there's always bad guys following and watching what they're doing and then trying to undo what they're doing or get there first. So there's bad guys and they're watching and they're like, well, if they're going to find a Pokemon fossil, we want to find it first so we get rich doing it. And then they decide they're going to use dynamite to find the fossils for some reason. How that's going to work. Instead of digging, they want to dynamite it up. And so they're about to set off the dynamite, and then Ash sees it, and so then he runs after. There's like a really long fuse, of course, right? So he sets off Squirtle to try and squirt out the fuse that's running, and then they all chase the fuse, and then they end up really close to the dynamite. The dynamite explodes and then opens it up into a cave in the bottom. And the bad guys and Ash and Pikachu fall into the cave. Then the hole gets covered up in a way that doesn't work with physics or gravity, right? And the other people are up still on the surface. They have to save them from being down below. But they're in this cave, and then they realize they're not alone in the cave. And there's actually living prehistoric Pokemon in the cave. And they're carnivorous. And so then they're going to eat them because they have this like app that tells them all the species of what the species of Pokemon are. So then they are getting attacked by these Pokemon, and then they kind of fight them. Pikachu tries to fight them. It doesn't work. And then just as they're about to be eaten, the scary Pokemon run away. And then it's the whole thing of like what scares away the monsters is a bigger, scarier monster, right? And then it is a dinosaur flying reptile type thing. And then the Charosaur, I think, gets really angry that this thing is bigger and looks like him and had bumped him when he flew by. So then Charosaur evolves to a bigger Charosaur, and then they chase each other and there's a fight. And then eventually Charosaur wins. Then Jigglypuff comes in because Jigglypuff wants to sing and nobody's letting her sing or him sing. And so they're really angry that no one's going to letting them sing. And then finally they're like, well, Jigglypuff singing will help the situation. And so they tell Jigglypuff to sing the song that puts everybody to sleep. And so he does. And then everybody falls asleep. And then my favorite part is that when everybody falls asleep, Jigglypuff gets annoyed. So they draw on everybody's faces like a sleepover party. And that's the end. Oh, they put the prehistoric things back in the ground.
And you're forgetting about the subtext of the egg.
Oh yeah, and they found an egg. I didn't pick up on subtext. What's the subtext?
Yeah. So, will I do the recap of the second one?
Well, do you want to discuss this one first, or do you want to recap the second one and
let's
discuss them all
this one
together?
first then. Let's discuss this one first.
Okay, what do you think?
What do you hate about it, Ross?
Just everything. Just everything. Like, as Josh said, basically this is like kind of cutesified version of cockfighting, where you keep your chickens in a kind of battery cage, which you kind of chuck out whenever you can be bothered to fight with them. And all the Pokemon have to live in this interdimensional stupid ball, apart from Pikachu, who's his favorite, who gets to kind of follow at his heels, doing fuck all of any use. Like, Pikachu is the one that blew up the dynamite by using his electric powers on it. I was really intensely annoyed by the fact that all the Pokemon, all they ever do is say their own name. So Jigglypuff just says Jigglypuff and sings Jigglypuff and shouts so Jigglypuff. Cute. No. And Pikachu only says Pikachu, and Charizard only says Charizard. It was just inane. And all the characters are totally annoying. Like, Ash is just a 10-year-old loser who, I couldn't care less about. Team Rocket, who are the bad guys, are just useless and don't even have a plan except pissing everyone off. Gary and his cheerleaders, I mean, who is he? Why should we care? The other two of Ash's friends, who I don't even think have names and are just completely forgettable. One's like a simpering redhead, and the other's a an idiot that says the most obvious thing in every situation. Yeah, that was 20 minutes of my life that I feel resentful of having wasted.
40. We watched.
So I guess this is the episode. Where we alienate all of our listeners who are Pokemon fans, right?
Yeah. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
I don't know. I was really big into Sailor Moon. I think I might have been into Pokemon too if it hit me when I was younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess we're all just slightly too old to have gotten into this at the time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot too old, in my case.
Well, did we have anything to say about the paleontology in this?
Well, I guess, there is some historical accuracy to finding dinosaur bones with dynamite. I mean, that's how they used to do things back in the sort of Chapman and Andrews days, or the Marsh and Osborne days. But yeah, not now.
There's not a lot to go on because there's, the paleontological dig is sort of the setup for the whole thing, but then nothing really comes of that except that they find some living fossils, apparently.
Which we've seen in other movies, like the Lost World type of idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly the same as the Futurama episode we kind of watched way back in the early days, where
except for no one gets turned into a hot dog.
Yeah, that's the one.
The same length of episode, but it feels like a lot more happened in the Futurama episode.
Much more entertaining as well.
Well, this is aimed at younger kids, right? So it's...
Yeah. You mentioned Marsh and Osborne. That's what I was thinking of too, like the Bone Wars.
Yeah.
You mean Cope and Marsh?
Yes, Cope and Marsh. Did you say Cope and Marsh, or did you say...
I said Osborne and Marsh.
And I didn't hear the mistake. But what were the Bone Wars?
The Bone Wars were a paleontologist from the Peabody Museum, and so it was Yale and Harvard or American Museum. Where was the other guy? Anyways, two paleontologists, famous American paleontologists at the beginning, were like, it was still very much go out to the Wild West and find your dinosaurs. And they were really competitive. And so they, it's like the hijinks. God, it's an amazing story. So they would like go out and sabotage each other's digs. They would dig fake fossils or mix up fossils and put them somewhere where the other person would find them so that they would describe them and be embarrassed. And the hijinks and everything, and they just really hate each other. One guy was more of a bully than the other guy, and I think that was Marsh. I think Marsh was the grumpy older guy, and Cope was the younger guy. But they both egged each other on. Like, they were both just horrible to each other. There's a book called The Gilded Dinosaur that goes through it quite well. And there's I think it's Cope. No, it was Marsh that donated his body to science because he thought he could be the type specimen. Is that it? That he wanted to be the type specimen for Homo sapiens or something like that? He donated his body to science. But because of their competitive nature, though, it spurred on a lot of work, and they both discovered and described a lot of dinosaurs, including the Brontosaurus, which was described incorrectly. So the Brontosaurus didn't actually exist until now when someone named it again, right? So one of them, because they were so rushed, they weren't doing the best job that they could. And I think they put an Apatosaurus skull on the wrong body, or it on the tail or something like that. And that was the Brontosaurus.
It was Cope that, I've just checked it out, it was Cope that donated his body to science. Even then, he was trying to get one over on Marsh, so his idea was that he'd donate his skull so that they could measure brain size to see if his brain was bigger than Osborne. But
it's just the best story, and how there hasn't been a movie about it yet, I have no idea, because it's just capers, right?
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
And they would do if they knew, so if Cope was out there excavating and he knew that Marsh and his goons were spying on them, they would pretend to find a fossil and set it up, and then when they'd come at night to go and look at what they found, it would be something silly or whatever.
F-U spelled out in bones.
Yeah, something like that. So funny. I love that story. I have the Stegosaurus tattoo I have on my stomach is a Marsh Stegosaurus, the first when it's incorrectly with the tail dragging and stuff.
Oh, right. I didn't know you had a Stegosaurus tattoo.
I just got it probably a few months ago because there's a tattoo artist that's affiliated with the department, a friend of the department. So he does really well, really cheap. He did it for
Okay.
it's pretty big, and it was only 2.5 hours. And he just came over to my house, so I got to just cuddle with Indy while he did it. And then took so long, and it was so short for how big it was and how detailed I wanted. So when he was like, "Oh, it's done," I was like, "Oh no." Expecting like just a stick drawing or whatever, but it's beautiful. I'll send you a picture. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
It's a friendship tattoo, actually. So my friend Kelsey has the same.
Okay. Wow. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, back to the Pokemon, unfortunately.
Right.
The prehistoric ones do have, one of them looks like an ammonite, and I think one of them is supposed to be a little bit like a trilobite or a eurypterid or something.
Yeah.
And the Aerodactyl is particularly rubbish. It looks like a pteranodon, so the big pterosaur with the head crest, but it's got teeth. And as far as I know, all the pterosaurs with head crests are toothless. So it's like the tapajarids and the pteranodons and things like that. But I think it did get it right that it had the wings supported by fingers, which is the pterosaur kind of version.
That's good.
And we should probably talk about evolution in Pokemon because it's not evolution.
No. It's metamorphosis.
Yes, it's metamorphosis. That's if you just take the word evolution out and just call it metamorphosis, it pretty much fixes the whole thing. So it's just that they're using the word wrong. I remember this when I was a teenager, first hearing about this show, being a nerd and being interested in biology as I was, being very upset that they called it evolution when it was clearly not evolution.
But I mean, it's not even metamorphosis because you can't decide to metamorphose as these Pokemon do. Oh yeah, you decided to evolve to become Charizard to help us because you like to be trained by me or some other bullshit.
I wrote that quote down because it was the most ridiculous thing I ever heard a character say. Charizard, you evolved because you wanted to rescue me when I got into trouble.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. I mean, it's like the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons, like the Scooby-Doo, where there's a lot of just repeated animation, running on the spot kind of stuff, zooming out from a still picture. It's just done so cheaply. It's just really aggravating that they must be absolutely raking in the cash from the various Pokemon licenses, but the cartoon just looks and sounds so cheap.
But they also are making how many are there in a season? Because one of them was season 1, episode 74. So they're making a ton of them, right?
Yeah.
The episode numbers are a little hard to figure out because on different places they're numbered differently, and maybe the American ones are different, numbered differently from the Japanese ones or something. But this series, I believe, is ongoing since 1997. It's been running continuously for 26 years.
Jeez. And the 2 random episodes that we chose have exactly the same plot.
No.
Yeah.
I actually asked my student after I watched it, I was like, does every episode end with Jigglypuff saving the day by putting everybody to sleep? And he was like, a lot of them, yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Do you know what? You talked about Hanna-Barbera and the recycled animation to make it cheaper. Mm-hmm. And the one I was thinking of, which was a Canadian cartoon that I grew up with from the 1960s, actually. It was always rerunning. And maybe, Kim, you'll remember this, Rocket Robin Hood. Did you ever watch that?
I don't think so. No.
It's like a 1960s sort of reimagining of Robin Hood, but in space. And it half of the episode was recycled animation of telling the backstory of each character. So the show would be periodically interrupted every 3 minutes to introduce a character with the same sequence every single episode. So half the episode was the same footage between every episode of just telling each character's backstory. And it was the cheapest possible animation.
I don't think I ever saw it, no.
Are Rocky and Bullwinkle Canadian? Or American?
I don't know. I don't think so. Because they must be American.
Aren't they a beaver and a moose? I mean, can you not
It's a squirrel and a moose.
A squirrel.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm in danger of insulting the Canadian national ethos there by suggesting that.
Speaking of Pokemon evolution, before we move on to the next episode, there's a paper from 2012 published in the excuse me
in Pokemon research.
no, published in the Annals of Improbable Research. You familiar with that journal?
Yeah.
It's a short paper called A Phylogeny and Evolutionary History of the Pokemon. And so there was a PhD student at the time who, I think the story goes, was sort of like waiting on some data, and so he couldn't do his research, and he was just trying to fill the time. And so he took all of the known Pokemon at the time. When the series started, there were 151 Pokemon, but by 2012, it had expanded to 646. I'm pretty sure it's into the thousands by now. But he did a phylogenetic analysis of them using on the assumption that evolution, as it's described in the show, is actually just metamorphosis. So he's ignoring that and just saying if you take all the Pokemon and consider them real biological species and like taking their traits into account, he did a phylogenetic analysis as you would for real living things and came up with a phylogeny of the Pokemon. And what he did in that is, so now the thing about the evolution in Pokemon is that for every like type of Pokemon, you have like 3 different types where one evolves into the next or like metamorphoses into the next. So he took each of those groups and considered them one species. So like Pichu, Pikachu, Raichu are like the stages of quote-unquote evolution, but he's considering that to be one organism that changes throughout its life cycle. And so you can read this paper, and if you want to see how all the Pokemon are assumed to have actually evolved, because he's starting from the premise that all these organisms in this universe must have evolved from a common ancestor through like real evolution. And you can check out how they all relate to one another. It's interesting because it includes things that living animals don't have, like their special abilities or like they have different classes, right? Like Pikachu shoots electricity. So like probably all your electricity Pokemon are, representing one clade.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense.
I guess that could count. Yeah, you do count sort of
Behavior
character traits. Sometimes you can weight them in your phylogeny. But I wonder if could the branches be time constrained using the prehistoric Pokemon from Grandpa Canyon that we saw in that episode? Could they have dated the evolution by using those living fossils as node anchors?
Hypothetically, they would be able to.
Yeah, it's a very brief paper, so I don't know if there's a supplemental material to go along with it. But that episode was in the first season, right? So those prehistoric Pokemon should have been included in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe he's saving it for a second paper.
It'd be interesting to see how many other papers cite that. Can you cite
if it's on Google Scholar,
papers from the Annals of Improbable Research?
I don't know. We'll have to look that up.
It's a real journal, isn't it?
Ish, I guess. I mean, we don't even really need to kind of recap the second episode because it's exactly the same, except slightly different monsters. But
okay, let's recap it anyway, and we'll see where it diverges.
Okay, so I'll just go through my notes as I was writing them. So it starts off with the Pokemon intro theme tune, and you have to ask, why the heck are they in space in the intro? Like, they never go to space, but suddenly all these Pokemon are in space. Anyway.
Well, we've only watched 2 out of a lot of episodes, so they might go.
Okay. So it opens with them, Ash doing some training of Pikachu. I mean, yeah, these are kind of these are sentient creatures that are imprisoned in a interdimensional red and white ball that have to be kind of trained to fight each other. I mean, it's pretty dystopian, I think, when you look at it like that.
When you point
and Pikachu's the only one that's actually seems to be allowed out for any amount of time, and they're training them to fight each other with lethal voltages and fire breathing and stuff. But yeah, he's crap at it. Of course, he's not very good at training them. So him and his idiot friend are training, and is it Charizard? Something that looks like a dragon.
Yeah.
With a fireball, sends a fireball, which uncovers a lost temple, which there is randomly a French female archaeologist and her hangers-on exploring nearby. They find some artifacts in this ruined temple, which they immediately kind of pick up, and then she comes running over and steals it off them. And it's obviously a great discovery. It's never explained what it is, but according to one of the quotes that I wrote down, the one of the archaeologists says to Eve, the French archaeologist, "Your discovery proves your hypothesis beyond any doubt," which is great. Obviously, whatever the hypothesis is.
I think the hypothesis was that there exists an ancient city called Pokémopolis.
Okay. Yeah. So this random temple proves that beyond any doubt. Team Rocket are watching. The bad guys are there just planning ways to piss everyone off. We find out a bit more about Eve, the French archaeologist. So she did her degree at age 6. She had her PhD at age 8. She wrote a book at age 9. So, pretty standard. There's an ancient curse on the city of Pokémopolis, according to the legends. They find a kind of old stela, which she can translate from a made-up language, which says some bullshit about Pokemons and darkness and the usual gubbins. The artifact that they found starts glowing. The Team Rocket decide that there must be bigger treasures than the glowing artifact in the temple, so they allow out their giant snake Pokemon, whose name I can't remember and don't care enough to learn. They send the snake into the temple to bring back the most valuable thing. So it brings back this. It looks like 3 testes, like joined together. God knows what
all
it
of
is.
the artifacts look like sex toys.
They do. They really do.
It kind of looks like innie beads, right?
Yeah. Anyway, and so the Team Rocket are disappointed that they've got what looks like a plug from the temple until it starts making people like freeze and then kind of teleporting them inside itself. And it's maybe the dark device that was prophesized in the ancient legend. And then a giant Gengar turns up, which is a Pokemon but enormous, and it goes on its way to wreck Ash's home village, which is nearby. So they sort of unleash some of their tiny little Pokemon to try and battle this giant Gengar, but they get absorbed easily. Eve gets absorbed, the French archaeologist gets absorbed, everyone gets absorbed into the artifact. But the other 2 artifacts, the ones that also look like sex toys, but one looks like a spoon, and one looks like, I hesitate to mention on a family channel. But they
double-ended, though.
Yeah, they sort of start to glow and then join together magically. And then another giant Pokemon appears, and I remember the name of this one, which is Alakazam, because that's all it ever says. Which it looks like I don't know. It's weird. It's a giant dragony thing which fights with spoons. I mean, it's like microdosing or something. We're watching these programs. It's like, oh yeah, he's got some deadly spoons that he's going to fight with. Okay, and then so Eve is talking to the other people that are imprisoned inside the dark artifact. And there's another great quote where she's feeling bad for uncovering all this evil. And somebody says, "Don't blame yourself, Eve. Archaeologists are supposed to solve mysteries." Do blame yourself, Eve. This is all your fault.
You brought this darkness upon the earth.
Exactly. You had all the information there, and still you just did it. So the next bright idea they have is to try and catch the giant Pokemons in a tiny Pokeball, but that doesn't work. The giant Pokemons are too powerful for the Pokeballs, and they can't be caught. And then Pikachu, I mean, he only has one trick, but damn it if he isn't going to use it at every opportunity. So the giant Pokemon are standing in a river, and so Pikachu kind of sends a billion volts through the water, and it does nothing because he is spectacularly useless. And then my notes say, fucking Jigglypuff singing again.
Saves
and that's
the
basically
day.
what happens. Jigglypuff appears
Saves the
again
day.
and starts singing, but his annoying lullaby song isn't loud enough for the monsters. So, out of nowhere, a giant Jigglypuff appears from the temple with like a massive microphone bell and sings a really deep version of the Jigglypuff lullaby, and the monsters go to sleep, and everyone falls asleep. And then they say something like how, oh yeah, when they're asleep, as in the previous episode, the giant Jigglypuff writes all over everyone's faces with just random sort of scribbles. And then the big
in both cases, the microphone, Jigglypuff takes the cap off the microphone, which is also a giant bell artifact in the second episode, and it turns into a Sharpie.
Yeah.
Why is the microphone also a Sharpie? That didn't make any sense at all.
No. I guess it's just standard issue for Jigglypuffs. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then they're kind of closing, I guess this would be their final conclusion in the archaeological paper about Pokémopolis, is that maybe a giant Jigglypuff protected the people of Pokémopolis.
Yeah. It's like the little one protects us all the time.
Yeah. And that's it.
Well, and then they also said that the artifact they think was like a original Pokeball.
Oh, yes. That's right. That will go in the supplementary materials, probably, when they're writing it up. Do they ever explain what Pokeballs are?
I don't know. Maybe
because it looks pretty shit. If what happened to them, they basically get kind of squeezed into a tiny interdimensional space with no room to move around. If that's what all these poor Pokemon are having to put up with when they're in the Pokeball, then why there's not more cases of Pokemon basically kind of ripping their trainers to tiny bits? I don't know.
Yeah, why it's not a war on, like an active war?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like whenever it's like Charizard, I choose you, Charizard should come out and immediately roast Ash to Ash. That would be kind of logical.
Maybe Thomas can explain it to us.
Well, I think that this is what happens with Ash, because I'm pretty sure that the reason Pikachu is never in a Pokeball is because Ash, like, it's a running joke, it seems, in the episodes that, like, Ash is finally doing some training. Like, it's a running joke that he never actually trains his Pokemon, which is why they're all so terrible. But, like, I'm pretty sure Pikachu is never in a Pokeball because Pikachu just won't get into a Pokeball. And in that first episode, when he pulls the Charmander out of the Pokeball to fight for them before it evolves, it just lies down and goes to sleep and doesn't fight for them, right?
Yeah.
It does seem like it happens a lot. If you don't train your Pokemon properly, they're not going to actually fight. They're just going to, like, sit down and go to sleep.
Yeah. Jigglypuff doesn't seem to be in a ball either, though.
Yeah, he seems to be wild. And just hanging around, trying to get people to listen to his shite singing.
Lurking, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here for anybody who is a fan of Pokemon who is still listening at this point. Can you explain to me why every single Pokemon just repeats its own name over and over and over, except for Meowth, the cat that goes with Rocket League, who can talk in full English, like with like a New Jersey accent for some reason?
Yeah, for some reason.
Why can Meowth talk and seem to have, like, full grasp of the English language, but no other Pokemon can? I don't understand that part. And also, is Meowth in charge of Rocket League, or is Rocket League in charge of Meowth? I can't understand, because sometimes it seems like one or the other is the leader of that group.
I got that there was, like, an overriding boss, because they talk about owing the boss money. And then I think the cat is, like, the supervisor.
The cat is the supervisor. Well, do we have anything to say about the archaeology in this episode?
I mean,
you shouldn't steal people's finds and pretend that they're yours. That's pretty bad archaeology.
Yeah, that's true. You shouldn't also just grave rob and steal treasure. I mean, there was no archaeology. It's just them.
It was
picking
Indiana
up the
Jones
artifacts.
style.
Yeah, they didn't do any strats or any kind of delicate brushing or any kind of archaeology. It's just running around in a pith helmet with your... I mean, how old is Eve supposed to be in this, do you think? She got her first book at 9. I mean, is she actually an adult, or is she like a teenager? Like,
I think she's a teenager.
I don't know.
I don't know.
They said she was like too young to be an archaeologist, so she's presumably some kind of a little kid. I think Ash is still supposed to be like 10 years old, isn't he?
That'd explain how annoying he is.
Yeah. It doesn't explain why there's a show based on him constantly failing to train his Pokemon, but somehow constantly getting into life-threatening situations. Seems like a failure of society at that point.
Yeah, it's a pretty dangerous universe. I mean, yeah, it is dystopian.
All right, do you know like the background of how Pokemon was created? That might actually make you like the series a little bit more.
I very much doubt it.
So, Pokemon was created by Satoshi Tajiri, who grew up in the suburbs of Tokyo. And he had like nature sort of outside his back door. He would like to go out and collect bugs and stuff, right? As I'm sure all of us did as kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, in the post-war...
We didn't make them fight each other, though. No one that I know.
You didn't?
No one got like some frogs and then basically like made them fight each other.
I didn't make frogs fight each other, but you know what I did was I would mix ants and grasshoppers into a container and watch them fight each other.
Like A Bug's Life.
Yeah.
My dad once found a black widow spider on his construction site, so he brought it home for us to see.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and he had it in a jar. And so then he sent us outside to find it food, right? We're going to keep it. So we went out and we found the biggest spider we could find so we would have a good meal. It was a wolf spider that we found. So we put the wolf spider in the jar with the black widow spider, and in the morning it was the wolf spider and just a couple black legs left.
It's an important lesson, isn't it?
Yeah.
Important lesson.
Well, anyway, Satoshi Tajiri was growing up in the suburbs of Tokyo collecting bugs, but then in like the post-war, like the following decades, Japan has like that period of crazy economic growth where it becomes like one of the second biggest economy in the world next to the United States, right? So like Tokyo develops like crazy, and like the suburbs where he grew up are gone now. They're just like dense urban city. And so he lost that childhood nature where he used to collect bugs. And anyway, he like gets into electrical engineering. He starts making video games. He's doing working for video game magazines, and gets a job making video games. And in the 1980s to the 1990s, he finds out about the Game Boy, which is just coming out. The Game Boy has a connector cable so that you can trade information between devices. And he realized that you could make a game where it could be like collecting bugs like when he was a kid. You know, there's lots of common ones, but occasionally there's a rare one. And if you're collecting them, you can trade your rare ones with other kids, right? He realizes he can make a game where you're collecting animals that are, you know, some common and some rare. And if you're playing this on the Game Boy, you can connect with somebody else and you can trade your rare ones. And so that's where the idea for Pokemon comes from. So it was started off as 2 Game Boy games. And then later evolved into the TV series and the card game, which is always kind of funny because you always think the card game is going to come first and adapt to a video game. But in this case, the video game is the first one, and everything else stemmed from that later. But the idea was to get kids excited about nature and biology because Japan was modernizing so fast that the kids didn't have access to nature anymore, which makes me like it a lot more knowing that that's the background behind it.
Yeah, but then why didn't he use real animals and bugs and things? And then
You can't fight real animals. That's unethical.
Well, you shouldn't fight imaginary animals either. I mean, that feels like he's kind of, as admirable as he started off in his aims, he's kind of lost his way somewhere and thought, yeah, that sounds cool, but wouldn't it be great if they kind of
killed each
threw
other,
electricity and bolts of flame at each other? That would make it more exciting for the kids.
I guess it does.
But it's a way of like every one of them has its own distinct traits. And so it's like paralleling real biology where all the different animals have their own traits and you can classify them based on their traits. So it kind of almost lends naturally to that PhD student doing the phylogeny of them because it was sort of set up in that way in the first place to get kids excited about biology.
Yeah. No, that doesn't make me like it anymore. Yeah, there must be Darwin was a big beetle collector. That was his kind of starting point as well.
Mhm.
There must be kind of scope for a game where Beetlemania or something, where you just collect beetles. You don't make them fight. You just oh look, I've got a cool beetle. That's great. I would buy that game.
There are games sort of like that. Some of them are not. I'm sure there are some more well-known ones, but there is a game that I played recently, which I'm sure is aimed at children, but it was still very fun, called Alba, I think. You play like this 10-year-old girl visiting her grandparents on a Mediterranean island, and your grandparents give you a cell phone with an app that has like identifying animals. And you basically wander around this island using your phone to take photos of animals and identify them, and you sort of like have an inventory to fill out. It was pretty fun.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
Elba as in the island off.
I don't know what's the island of Elba.
It's Mediterranean islands where Napoleon was imprisoned before they sent him to St. Helena, because he escaped from Elba and then mustered another army and marched on Paris. And so they thought, well, clearly we've got to get him a bit further away next time. ELBA.
EL?
Yeah.
This name is ALBA.
All right.
Is it the name of the girl?
Yeah.
All right. It's also the Gaelic word for Scotland. Interesting. I had a Game Boy. That was my 10th birthday present in 1990 was a Game Boy.
And we had a family one. Played Tetris on.
Yeah, I didn't let anyone else play it.
Mm-hmm.
I got mine a little bit later when I was 12 in 1997, but this was in between the regular Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, so it's the Game Boy Pocket. So it's a regular Game Boy, but a smaller sized Game Boy, which if I held out for like another year, I probably would have got a Game Boy Color.
Yeah, my sister got one of those.
Yeah, mine was like it was heavy to lift it up.
The old one.
Yeah.
It took like 1 million batteries, which lasted about an hour. But with Tetris and Super Mario, that was the two games that you got at the start. And I was so good at Tetris that I actually, when I was about 15 or something, I found an arcade game that was like, you put money in to play Tetris, and if you get a certain number of lines, then you win money. And I won 20 quid on it, which
nice.
Which when you're like 14, 15, that was a massive fortune.
Yeah.
And I was slightly worried that maybe I would become an addicted gambler, but I managed not to go down that route.
It's not gambling if it's a game of skill.
Yeah.
It's Tetris, you can just win.
Yeah.
I thought there was maybe a lesson about interpreting archaeological artifacts in here, because out of the artifacts that we find, most of them are they look like sex toys, and you have no idea what they're supposed to be. But one of them is very clearly a spoon.
Yeah, ritual use.
Yeah.
One of them is very clearly a spoon. And like when they pick it up, like, okay, that's obviously a spoon, but it turns out it's not a spoon, it's actually a key. And so I thought maybe we could say there's a lesson in there about, assuming what an artifact is for based on your own cultural experience, which is actually going to be very different from the culture of the people who created it. And maybe it's, despite the fact that it looks obviously like something your culture would use, that doesn't necessarily mean that's how it was used by the people who created it.
Yeah, that did just look like a spoon, though.
Yeah. I think you're giving the writers way too much credit here. This is very much a post hoc rationalization, but it's a good point. Definitely a good point. I haven't ever done any real archaeology in my life. That's not kind of what I've done. But I remember watching a program ages and ages ago. It's really interesting. It was where it was an ethnographic study of some Aboriginal groups where they were hunting for tubers, and they had like mussel shells with perforations in them, and they were using those the way you would use like a vegetable peeler. So like by drawing it over the tuber, you could kind of easily cut off just the skin. And I was thinking, that's amazing. When you find all these kind of perforated shells, you think immediately, oh, maybe they've just turned into a necklace. Maybe it was just like an adornment or something that was had no functional capabilities. But here you were seeing from an ethnographic perspective that something wouldn't occur to somebody from a Western perspective, it was used as a very useful tool.
Yeah, there's another example, which I can't remember too clearly off the top of my head, of something about archaeologists interpreting the difference between axe heads and adze heads in the archaeological record. So like an adze is like a perpendicular axe, like you know how the blade is in line with the handle, and adze has like the blade perpendicular to the handle, like a hoe shape kind of. But they were like trying to make a distinction between these axe heads and adze heads, these stone tools in the archaeological record. Trying to be like, oh, this is shaped like this, so it must be an adze, and this is shaped like this, and it must be an axe. And then like they were looking at sort of a modern foraging group who is still using these stone tools as an ethnographic comparison. And they had similar axe and adze heads, except that they didn't make a distinction. They just sort of mounted them in whatever kind of tool they needed at the time. And so the archaeologists were over-interpreting the archaeological record and being like, this difference must mean something. And as it turns out, it was just sort of variation in the way the tool was produced, or at least it was in the ethnographic group that they were using for comparison.
Yeah, I guess those are the two kind of main trip-ups that are possible. It's like over-interpretation and under-interpretation. So where you have you see differences that aren't really there, or you don't see differences that are there.
Type 1, type 2 errors, right?
Exactly.
Well, Ross, do you have any more complaints about Pokemon before we're done?
Well, yes, sure. I think Jigglypuff should go into a Pokeball and never come back out.
No, I want to cuddle with Jigglypuff, and I want him to sing me to sleep every night.
No, I bet he has a lot of mucus, Jigglypuff. He looks like he would be slimy. We saw some other Pokemon around the point. There was one Geodude who was like a rock thing.
Onyx.
An Onyx, yeah. Was that the snake thing?
No, Onyx was his name. The rock thing was named Onyx.
Oh,
no, there's Geodude as well. Geodude and Onyx. There's different rock type Pokemons, I think.
Okay, I'm sure they grouped together with a reasonable posterior for the kind of phylogeny of Pokemons, the kind of rock type Pokies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we see them, and yeah, they're pretty rubbish as well.
Well, they're all pretty rubbish.
I was just looking up the prehistoric ones we saw. The one that looks like an ammonite is called ammonite, oddly enough. So clearly inspired by ammonites.
Yeah.
And the one that looks like a trilobite, I think it is kabuto. I don't know what that means, but it also seems to be inspired by a trilobite.
Okay.
Oh, and then the flying one was aerodactyl.
The pain in your face, Ross.
Yeah, I know. Just and I'm presuming all of these have their own like Wikipedia entries.
Yeah, there are many pages that keep track. It looks like possibly the Wikipedia for Pokemon is called Bulbapedia.
Apparently, there's a real pterosaur called Aerodactylus.
Oh,
really?
Yeah, but named in like the 1860s. So, yeah.
It doesn't look that unlike the Pokemon.
Yeah.
Oh, it's tiny.
Yes, very small.
Cute.
That would be a neat pet.
Yeah, it would.
It's like a pigeon size. It's like smaller than a pigeon.
Yeah.
Aww.
Also pretty sure there is a pigeon Pokemon.
I'm sure. I mean, there's hundreds.
What name does it have? I bet it's spectacularly dumb as well.
I think it's Pidgey.
I was right. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, I think if I have to watch another episode of Pokemon, it would be too soon.
There's 9 pigeon-based Pokemon.
Is there really?
Yeah. One is
each name worse than the last?
Pidgeotto, Pidgeot, Pidgey. There's a Spearow.
We need a Pidgeotomy. That's what we need.
Do you know, if you want to learn all the names of the Pokemon, at the end of one of our episodes, there was a Poke Rap, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a guy I follow on YouTube named Brian David Gilbert, who is hilarious if you like sort of absurdist comedy. And I think it was with the YouTube channel Polygon, which talks about video games and stuff. There's a video where he does a Poke Rap that includes all of the Pokemon that existed at the time he did the rap.
All 600 of them?
No, I think it was more at that point because it was more recent. I think it was like 1,000 Pokemon or something like that.
How long does it go on for? Does he have to take a drink of water?
It's about 15 minutes long.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
It is amazing because he's a very talented musician. So to keep it interesting, the rap style changes a lot throughout it. It starts off in that like Pokemon style, like similar to what we heard in the episode, and then it gets into like more serious modern rap, like with the triplets, like how rap hip hop works these days, and then it jumps into like late 80s sort of educational rap style. We'll link that in the show notes. You guys should definitely watch that because it is very fun.
Yeah, I will check that out.
All right. Well, what do we think about Pokemon in the end?
I think it's cute.
I think whatever the opposite of Kim said.
I think you have to be 10 years old or under to really get into this, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying I'm going to get into it. I'm just saying it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be.
It's a possibility, though, isn't it, Kim?
Do you still have your Game Boy?
It was never mine. We always had to share
it. You're an adult now. You can get your own Game Boy.
I could. If I did, it would be something that I would buy and then use for a week like crazy. It would just be attached to me, and then I'd never touch it again. Is my way.
Does Pokemon, the game, it must be on other platforms now as well. I don't know if they even make Game Boys anymore, do they?
Well, there was that Pokemon app that everybody was doing, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Pokemon in general is exclusive to Nintendo, except the Pokemon Go, I guess, was not exclusive to Nintendo since it was a phone app. But there are lots of Pokemon games, but they're all exclusive to Nintendo platforms. So the Switch is the current console, and there must be still a different handheld version, although the Switch is portable and a console, so maybe the Switch is just the current portable device. I'm not sure. I haven't followed Nintendo since I was a kid.
Pokemon on the Wii. I wonder how that would work.
There must have been a Pokemon for the Wii. I don't know.
Yeah, you'd throw the ball. There'd be a lot of broken TVs,
right? All the fun of throwing a ball.
If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestonage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.